me, is unique to most presidents. You know, whether you agree with what he's doing or not, at least he didn't come in saying a lot of stuff just to get elected. Of course, I think there's plenty of people that wish he wasn't keeping his promises. It's a tough, brutal job, and you know, there's looking at the succession of presidents over my lifetime. I'm 63 now, starting with Eisenhower, who I really didn't know much, but historically I read up about him because I thought he was a pretty impressive person. In relating, how many presidents would that be? Like 8, 9 maybe in my lifetime? It doesn't really matter. In relating world governance to the middle way of the Eightfold Path, and then you look at how each president affected the other presidents and how their leadership affected the whole, it all works out pretty balanced. You know, we have some extreme presidents who get people very excited, who have extreme views, maybe not extreme views, maybe just views in general. But in the end, the United States government as a whole keeps coming back to the middle. And when you look at the formation of the Constitution, and I'm not one of those people that say America is right or wrong no matter what. We can't do anything wrong. But when you look at the Constitution, it was written to hope to establish that middle way between extreme views, because it was an extreme view that formed our country at the beginning. I remember I had a conversation with Ellie right after the election, and she was so upset, and she wanted me to say a few words here in class on it. This is about a month or two after, you know, the country was still very upset. And really, the only thing that I can say is that the office of the president, past, present, and future, is part of the First Noble Truth. It always will be. Dukkha will occur. And so there's always going to be people in that office that make us happy, and there's going to be people in that office that make other people unhappy. It's the perfect example of ongoing suffering too, isn't it? You know, the issues that a president, again, take the face off it. The issues that a president is facing on a moment-by-moment basis is the essence of dukkha. And so what comes out of that office seems to be, it's always going to be reflecting some essence of that. And maybe we can, you know, keeping all that in perspective and knowing what I said to Ellie was that everything is impermanent, including that office. At best, you get 8 years, and sometimes you get 4 if you're really lousy at it. And then you get a chance to put somebody else in to continue that balance. So that's enough of that little talk on. I don't want to leave anything. Anybody have anything to say? I mean, I just made a political statement, I guess. Does anybody want to comment on it? Shouldn't just try to cut it off like that. It wasn't much of a statement. Just that we should give everybody a chance, you know. Not anybody is just one way. Just not the way things are. So let's meditate first. We're in the 8th or 9th week, I can't remember, of our 12-week Dhamma study. We're kind of in the middle of 4 or 5 weeks on understanding not self. These 2 weeks, the chapter in the book is called Understanding Not Self, and it's on dependent origination and the 5 clinging aggregates. And so we'll get into a little bit more of how those two relate. And so we're gaining a deeper understanding of the 3 marks of existence, the impermanence of all things. Excuse me. Let me qualify this like I always do. Everything the Buddha taught was taught in the context of what he awakened to, dependent origination, and in the context of 4 Noble Truths. And the overarching context of all of that are the 3 marks of existence. Everything within this that we're talking about, everything that I ever talk about in this room in relation to the Dhamma is impermanent. And it relates to the not self characteristic, meaning that there's a problem here in our life. We don't understand who we are in relation to the world. Those are the first 2 marks of existence. Everything is impermanent. There's a misunderstanding of self. It's a common human problem. And because of those first 2, the result is a less than satisfying life experience. Sometimes it's just mildly disappointing. Sometimes we're indifferent to it. And sometimes it's extremely frustrating and painful. That's all part of the human experience. It's all part of the 3 marks of existence. Dependent origination states that from ignorance of the way things are, of Four Noble Truths, all manner of confusion, deluded thinking, and suffering arises. The Buddha awakened to dependent origination. I know you hear me say this a million times, but it's important that identifies the problem that he was seeking. So we also have to remember what he was seeking to understand what he taught, don't we? During the Buddha's time, as well as our time, it was very common for people to seek answers to the great questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Who made me? Is there a creator? Where do I go after I die? Where does a Buddha go after he dies? All those great mystical questions that men and women have been asking since the beginning of time. And most religions are formed, at least in part, to answer those great questions, to satisfy those answers, aren't they? Because if we can satisfy those great questions, then I can kind of get you to believe my religion. And I'm not putting down religions, but that's one of the reasons why religion hopes to answer those great questions. What sets Buddhism apart from religion, and what sets what the Buddha taught apart from the religions of his day, is just really that point. The Buddha wasn't interested in answering the great questions of his day. He realized pretty early on in his life that those were just a distraction. What he was concerned with developing an understanding of was the nature of suffering. And so the nature of suffering occurs not because we don't understand the great questions, and so we're lacking direction because of lacking understanding of the great questions. Does that make sense, what I just said? We're not moving in that direction because we're lacking the overall context. But it's the nature of ignorance to continue to ignore its own ignorance, to create very powerful and subtle strategies to ignore that own ignorance. And you could say in general that the world is like that. The world is a constant ongoing distraction from recognizing our own ignorance and solving the problem of from ignorance all manner of suffering arises. So the Buddha described dependent origination this way. From ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrications. Mental fabrications are assumptions that we make, false assumptions that we make on ourselves based on a lack of knowledge, in this case, lacking understanding. From ignorance as a requisite condition come fabrications, come assumptions, right? So from that point, now notice this isn't a creation myth. We're not trying to describe how physical birth actually takes place, although modern Buddhism tries to take dependent origination, twist it around, call it dependent co-arising, and claim it as a creation myth. It's none of that, and you'll understand that if you understand it now because you've read it. But as soon as you see the Buddha's words, you understand that. The Buddha is simply describing how suffering arises. In this moment, and the Dhamma unfolds in our moment, no matter where we are in our lives also. So in this moment, dukkha is occurring as a consequence of having a human life. It's occurring in our lives because we lack understanding of Four Noble Truths. So ignorance is having its effect in this present moment. And it is in this present moment, in this room, on Tuesday night, in this class, as our life unfolds, that the Dhamma takes place. It's not in the past, it's not in the future, it's not during the Buddha's time, it's not when we get smart enough tomorrow, it's right here, right now. So what that means is that the ignorance that's causing the problem is present, but also the wisdom that can end ignorance is present. Are we going to apply ourselves to it? Are we going to end those assumptions? Are we going to deal with the issue of ignorance directly? Because that's the problem. Am I clear on that? What's the direct problem? What causes all the suffering in the world? Not quite. What causes all the suffering in the world? What's the root cause?
Ignorance.
Okay, thank you. I just need to make a little bit of a finer point before I go on. From ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrications. Really beating up that dead horse, aren't I? But to make the point that what you're holding in mind, the assumptions you have until awakened, are rooted in ignorance. So let me ask you this, Kevin, do you want to spend the rest of your life rooted in ignorance? Tom, how about you? Lorna, would you like to spend the rest of your life rooted in ignorance? Lorna? I couldn't tell your expression, so I wasn't.
No, I don't want to, but I'm also cautious and a little bit nervous of what, if I'm not in ignorance, what am I in? You know,
Okay.
I'm a little, not nervous, I'm very curious, but healthily curious, you know.
It is. That's a skillful curiosity is a good idea if it's headed in the right direction. So I'll ask Diana the same question. Pardon me?
It's all right.
It's all right? Okay. All right. From ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrications. From those fabrications as a requisite condition comes consciousness. So again, remember, this isn't a creation myth. I'm not trying to describe how a human body is born and then in that human body thinking starts arising. It's got nothing to do with that. And notice where the Buddha starts. He didn't say X number of years ago, your mom and dad met each other and they had a fun evening and then 9 months later you came along. He's not trying to describe birth in any type of way. But what he's saying now is from ignorance as a requisite condition come fabrications, comes mental assumptions. From those mental assumptions, from those fabrications rooted in ignorance, comes consciousness. It's the consciousness that we have. It's the ongoing thinking that we have rooted in ignorance. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, the Buddha is describing a very simple process. We are lacking an understanding of something. Because of that lack of understanding, we form assumptions, fabrications about that, and those fabrications now inform our ongoing thinking. Our thinking is based on those fabrications, right? From consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. The name and form in Pali is nama rupa, means name and form. So out of this initial ignorance, now remember, I'm in the world, I'm functioning in the world, I'm having a life. There's nobody to blame for me to be in the world. I'm here, I'm established, I'm struggling, I'm confused. I've had a series of disappointing experiences. I've had some very traumatic experiences. I'm middle-aged and I don't know where I'm going. I got 4 kids that are driving me crazy and a mortgage that I can't, what do I do? What's going on? What happened? What am I missing? I'm missing an understanding of impermanence and not self-characteristic and the resulting dukkha. That's why I'm in stress at this moment, despite what's going on around me. All of that is described as dukkha occurs when I gain an understanding of myself and remove the need for life to be any different than it is. I'm at peace. Because why? Because there's no more ignorance. It's ignorant. It's an aspect of ignorance for me to be sitting here tonight thinking about all the really difficult things that happened to me and how is my life ever going to get any better and what a mess this is, and teach a class. How could I? I would be so distracted by thinking about all those things that I couldn't make any sense. Probably not. Or maybe that's the problem tonight. It is so easy for a self-referential ego self to get caught up and take things personal that they lose the ability to function. And is that clear? That's what I was hoping to describe coming up to that. I'm so caught up in what's happened to me today that I can no longer do what I need to do.
Just phenomena.
Yes, that's what happens. And so then we start substituting less than skillful behavior. So it might be that I know I'm not prepared. Just using this as an example, I know I'm too distracted to do what I'm supposed to do, but I do it anyway because I have a reputation and I need the money and all these other things. So I go ahead and do it. And I say something completely foolish that turns everybody off, and they never come back to the Dhamma again because that bald, crazy guy on Tuesday night or Thursday night said that, and that just can't be right. So I've hurt myself, but I've also hurt you in a way that I think can't be recovered, meaning I've turned you away from the Dhamma. These are the things that happen rooted in ignorance because my thinking is not based in reality. So again, I'm going to ask the question, did I go too far with that? Or are you clear where I'm going, where once my thinking is affected by ignorance, anything is possible? Or any type of suffering is possible, I should say. Is that clear?
It's not how I think. yes, it's clear, but it's not the first thing that I think of when I think of anatta and dependent origination and the description of. It's not the first thing I think of.
Yeah, I
know it's all intermingled in that.
Yeah.
And the root and getting caught up in the phenomena distracts you.
Yes.
From who you're just so distracted that you're not yourself.
Yep. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the first thing that you think of. As we develop the Eightfold Path and deepen our mindfulness of what's there, then the Eightfold Path simply becomes a natural expression. We don't have to think about it. It simply becomes who we are. As we learn, as we learn more of the Dhamma and how it applies to our lives and how to make the application, then those things just follow naturally. Okay, let me keep going. This will never get through.
Are we doing the class now and the meditation afterward?
Oh yeah, did I? I think I forgot. I got so deep into it. Thank you for saying that. Talk about let me finish this then, and we'll meditate after. So, from consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. From name and form as a requisite condition comes the sixth sense base. And notice the transgression. I've now identified myself as this is me. From that self-identification now, okay, notice that attachment. From that self-identification, now my senses are interpreting things from that personal point of view. Up until that point, there was no personal point of view. I was simply interpreting phenomena from the mindfulness of the Eightfold Path. I was seeing things in reality. Is that clear?
No, because you start from rooted in ignorance.
Yes, and once I developed the
description of dependent origination, the first line is from ignorance.
Yes.
So you've just said before your sixth sense base, you were seeing things clearly.
Outside of the context of suffering arising from ignorance. And an awake, fully mature human being interprets contact with the sixth sense base in an impersonal way. There's no me there. So that's what I'm referring to. From name and form as a requisite condition comes the sixth sense base. From the sixth sense base as a requisite condition comes contact. Makes sense. We have to have senses in order to contact the outside world, correct? From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling. Makes sense too. I have to have some senses in order to generate, and feelings in this sense is any type of movement in the mind. Anything that's getting our attention. Anything that's creating any movement in the mind in this sense is a feeling. Let me continue. From feeling as a requisite condition comes craving. So something's come in contact. And remember the whole progression. Something's now finally come in contact with my senses, and I like it. Because I've already personalized my life, and I come across something that I like, now I want more of it. That's craving. Or if something comes into my life that creates an aversion and I want less of it or I don't want any more of it, that's the same. It's still wanting something to be different than it is. Right? From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling. From feeling as a requisite condition comes craving. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging and maintaining. So now I've identified myself. I've taken something personal. I've decided that I like it. And now in order to maintain my happiness, and this is all occurring within my own confused thinking. Now, in order for me to maintain my happiness, I have to hold on to that because I've decided that I need whatever that is, or I need to spend the rest of my life avoiding it. Or if it's not a constant issue, it becomes an underlying stressor in my life because it's always there. That's an indifferent part of my life. But I know I don't want that experience again. It's become part of my conditioned thinking. And then there's that underlying tension too. Is this clear? Mm-hmm. Ignorance, mental fabrications, consciousness, ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance, name and form, feelings, but contact and feelings. And now, and the reason why I'm saying that is notice the progression to where I am right now. Now I'm in my physical body. And you could say that this whole sequence from ignorance to clinging and maintaining happens outside of time. In other words, it happens so quickly we can't pick up on that process. So don't look. The reason I'm saying is don't look for it. Just recognize that the process has taken place. If you find yourself taking anything personal, you're stuck in something rooted in ignorance. And you can see that whole progression right here. And really the overall importance of that is just to recognize. It's not to then start picking apart or using dependent origination to analyze whatever's occurring. It's simply recognize that you're now stuck in that experience of ignorance.
It's really, really important to understand what ignorance is.
Yep, ignorance is a lack of knowledge. And so in this case,
You don't know that.
in this case, we do know. We do know. And you asked this question a couple of months ago, and it's a great question. What we do know is that it's ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And so what does that mean? When we understand that, when I know I'm ignorant of something and I want to end that ignorance, what I need to do then is to study about that subject. In this case, it's what we're doing right here. And how do we end ignorance of Four Noble Truths? We develop the Eightfold Path. So is that clear, Diane?
Not at all.
It's not clear that it's ignorance of Four Noble Truths that is the problem?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got to figure that one out then.
I understand.
The Buddha, let me put it this
Doing
way.
the same thing over and over again, if we're not getting anything.
That has nothing to do with ignorance, so that's just a strategy to continue ignorance. Okay.
For a second. That it's time to maybe start to do something different, but I don't necessarily in my, mind understand that is ignorance.
Okay.
So
So
I have to try something else.
do you, just trying to think of something. Do you know how to change the brakes on a car?
Probably.
Okay, it's a bad. Yeah. Do you know how to do brain surgery efficiently? I know you don't.
Right now.
So you are ignorant of brain surgery, correct? That's a fair statement.
Yes.
Do you have penetrative knowledge of Four Noble Truths?
I don't know what penetrative means in that essence.
I don't want to go too far with this, Diane. An explanation of ignorance is a lack of knowledge. And I don't know where else you want me to go with that. Do you understand that explanation?
Does a brain surgeon know that he has ignorance?
I don't know, but you're asking for. See, I'm getting just a little bit frustrated because I got a lot I want to get done tonight. I don't know how to go, and I don't know how to go any further with it.
Don't worry about
Well,
it.
no, but I think it's important because it's the central theme here.
Well,
Ignorance is a lack of knowledge. Please, Diane, let me explain it this way. Ignorance is a lack of knowledge, and it can't be anything else. So this is a really good example of the process of ignorance and using a strategy to ignore something to continue that ignorance. Ignorance is a lack of knowledge. The Buddha awakened to the profound knowledge that it is ignorance of Four Noble Truths, that all manner of suffering arises. So he spent the next 45 years of his life teaching Four Noble Truths.
I got that.
Okay, so then what's the question? Do you understand what ignorance is?
Okay, go ahead.
But I can't let it go. There's other people here and there's people online, and I can't just let it go. Do you understand what ignorance is? Let me ask it this way: does everybody understand what ignorance
In
is?
the context of the subjective, I understand all the whole thing, or sort of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. But in context of my life, no. I don't understand when I bump into something that I'm ignorant about.
It doesn't. Well, okay. I wouldn't know what that is. I wouldn't,
Me
or you or anybody else. I wouldn't know
I
what
just
people.
follow along, and then I try to figure out, and I try to apply the Eightfold, the
Well,
Four Noble Truths. I realize, oh,
yes.
okay, this must
That
be Dukkha.
well, that's what this.
So now I'm okay. There's a way out of Dukkha. I can
Yeah.
go there, and then I practice. Okay, I take a look at the Eightfold Path, and was my speech right? Was my view right? Was my
That's it.
all that kind of stuff right? And that's what I'm doing.
That's how you do it. That's how you end ignorance of Four Noble Truths.
That's how what?
That's how we end. The Buddha taught an eightfold path so that we can integrate it into our lives as a course of study to end ignorance of Four Noble Truths. I know we spent quite a bit of time on this, but I'm still not clear. Am I answering your question? It's just. I'm sorry, Diane. I'm not sure if I'm being helpful to you or not. But when a question is brought up in class, I like to make sure that it's answered correctly. So did I? I'm getting a blank answer here. Did I answer your question?
All right.
Well, it's not all right with me if the question isn't, because ignorance is such an important concept that if you don't understand it, everything I say is worthless. So, and I think you're getting uncomfortable too. I don't mean to put you on a spot, but that's why this is so important. So let me just do this in general. Ignorance is a lack of knowledge. The Buddha recognized that it was a lack of knowledge of Four Noble Truths that all manner of suffering arises. So he taught Four Noble Truths his entire life. So, okay. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging and maintaining. From clinging and maintaining as a requisite condition comes becoming. From clinging to those experiences that are rooted in ignorance comes becoming. What is the reference there? It's becoming further ignorant because it's rooted in ignorance. If I'm acting in such a way, and remember, these are very subtle strategies that are employed to continue to ignore ignorance. It's hard to see it. But we go to great lengths to do that, and that is the problem. And so we'll do anything we can. Once we become established in ignorance, we'll do just about anything to continue to establish that ignorance in our lives. Okay? From becoming as a requisite condition comes birth. And that's what the Buddha is referring to in dependent origination, what we're giving birth to. And that's the thing to consider. If what I'm giving birth to is rooted in ignorance, it can only cause more suffering. If there's a way for me to gain understanding where there once was ignorance, then I can live a life of peace and happiness. And that's why the Buddha taught an eightfold path. Continue. From birth as a requisite condition comes sickness, aging, death, sorrow, regret, pain, distress, and despair. Then the Buddha described in slightly more detail in reverse order each of those 12 links. So what is aging and death? Aging is decrepitude, brokenness, graying, decline, weakening of the faculties. It's just having a human life. Death is the passing away of the 5 clinging aggregates. This is leading towards next week a little bit too. The ending of time, the interruption of the life faculties. And what is birth? Birth is the descent, the coming forth, the coming to be. Birth is the appearance of the 6 sense bases and the 5 clinging aggregates. Again, we're not talking about a creation myth, giving birth to a life rooted in ignorance. And now what is becoming? Becoming is sensual becoming, form becoming, and formless becoming. That last formless refers to the belief in a individual soul that migrates life after life, meaning as in formless, in the formless. And what is clinging and maintaining? There are 4 types of clinging. Clinging to sensory stimulus, right? We all know that. Clinging to views. And this is really clinging to any idea that anatta might have. It will defend that view once it's identified the view as its own. Clinging to precepts and practices, meaning rituals we think we need to engage in order to awaken. And clinging to a doctrine of self, which is anything that we would do that would continue to ignore our own ignorance. Just trying to gauge the time a little bit. There is, I mentioned that I was going to read into the Loka Sutta tonight, and I'm not going to because I want to talk a little bit more about this sutta. Is everybody clear where we are right now? Okay. And what is craving? There are 6 classes of craving. Craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for smells, craving for taste, craving for physical sensations, and craving for ideas. So there's a lot of lists here that we're talking about. It's not important to remember every one of these singular subjects. It's just important to remember, again, the overall context in which the Buddha is teaching here. And what he's saying, again, is it is through contact with our 6 senses, because the interpretation is rooted in ignorance, that we can no longer trust what we're interpreting. So we have to find a way of referencing what's occurring in our life within these 3 marks of existence. And what is feelings? Feeling has 6 classes as well. Feeling arises from eye contact, from ear contact, from nose contact, from taste contact, from body contact, and from intellect contact. That is called feeling. So again, anything that contacts our senses and creates any type of movement in our minds, that's contact, and that's creating a feeling, right? And again, keep it in the context. We start interpreting the world through our feelings, don't we? And that feeling rooted in ignorance. This is all pointing to.
And so those feelings are to be discarded.
Why would they be discarded? I don't know.
Because they lead to ignorance.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that I ever used that word. I don't think I would, because it has a little bit of a negative connotation. They're simply not to be taken personally. So it's really not a matter of discarding them or giving them or overemphasizing them. It's simply bringing to cessation, living my life based on how I feel, and basing how I feel on personal views rooted in ignorance. So it's not a matter of discarding feelings either. It's simply about I'll say it again. It's not diminishing them, and it's not overemphasizing them. It's simply recognizing that feelings occur. So feelings aren't the problem. Thinking isn't the problem unless it's rooted in ignorance. Dukkha isn't the problem unless it's a problem that we want to solve. Ignorance isn't a problem unless it's a problem that we want to solve. It doesn't matter to me at all if I'm ignorant of 4 Noble Truths, if I don't really care about being ignorant of 4 Noble Truths, does it? Who cares? Or anything else. It's another aspect of the ego self that won't admit that it doesn't know something. And so think about all the things that it could know, and it doesn't really know anything, does it? Except about what it does. That's all it should be.
You know, I don't know what Sutta is. With feelings, you know, in the seen, there's only what is seen.
Yep.
In the smell, there's only what is smell. And there's no me.
Yep.
So you don't necessarily want to discard it, but you don't want to over-personalize it. If you do over-personalize it, then it can lead to more trouble for you, more anatta, more I-making, and then that leads to more dukkha. So ultimately, I don't know if discarding is the right word, but just realizing that it is not personal. And we will have feelings because we are beings that have feelings.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. The Satipatthana and the Anapanasati Sutta both spoke to this too, and the initial instructions to meditate. Become mindful of the breath in the body. And then as you become mindful of your breath in your body, notice that feelings arise. There's no instruction there to find a feeling and then discard it. It's simply come back to the sensation of breathing. The feeling flows. And so even if you remember the instructions, feelings arise and thoughts flow. We're sensitive beings. Feelings are part of having a human life. We could no longer discard or deny our feelings than we would be discarding or denying our own life. So the purpose of the Dhamma, again, is to recognize that we are ignorant of 4 Noble Truths, develop an 8-fold path, and so to allow us to live our lives moment by moment as our life unfolds, no matter what we're feeling, no matter what we're thinking, no matter what's occurring, in peace and harmony. Constantly. The Buddha set out, and you're getting right to the heart of the matter, Diane. The Buddha set out to understand the nature of suffering. And I guess you could generalize suffering as saying it's a feeling. So this is getting to the heart of the matter. And it's not a matter of discarding it. It's not a matter of overemphasizing it. It's a matter of not taking anything personal anymore. So again, thank you for bringing that up. It's a good point. Did I answer your question? My eyes are really bad tonight. So if you're wondering why I'm staring at you, because I can't see I can't see your expression. I don't know. So please speak up a little bit and say yes or no, or I'm not following, because I just can't tell. And what is contact? Phenomena contacting the ear, the eye. I know I said this, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the intellect. This is contact with the sixth sense base. And that's just to make the point. The Buddha often talked about the eye and the ear and the nose, each having their own type of consciousness, meaning that they're interpretive in the way that the senses come through them. Is that clear? And so, and the reason why that is, once something comes in contact with my eye, that consciousness is immediately interpreting it in reference to not self. So I got to find a way to catch that. That's practicing restraint. And what is name and form? Feeling, now the Buddha is going to describe the 5 clinging aggregates. Feeling, perceptions, intentions, attention, all mental aspects, and contact. Discriminating consciousness is name. Right? I'm me, and this is what I like in my life. This is what I don't like in my life. Discriminating consciousness is name. Does everybody get that one line? It's such an important line. Discriminating consciousness is name. Discriminating consciousness identifies who we are. And not to anybody else. That really doesn't matter. Although it does.
That's a good line. I haven't heard you say that before.
Discriminating consciousness is the name. Whatever I decide I like or dislike, or am even indifferent to, I'm claiming as my own. I'm using that to describe my life to myself and to the world around me. Discriminating consciousness is the name. Whatever I hold in mind, whatever I discriminate about. Discriminate means I like it or I don't like it, or I'm indifferent to it. Whatever I discriminate about, all 3 things, I'm creating an identity about.
So, okay. If I don't like, okay. If I don't like living with a wild lion in my house, I should, what my mind should do is to, okay, that's a not like, I don't like doing that. So but I get to a equitable place where I don't like or dislike, and I learn to live with the lion, whether I like it or not.
Yes. Well, are you asking me a question?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the question is. Should you do that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I'm interpreting this to mean is that I don't have likes or dislikes. I remain neutral, and therefore.
I never said that, but go ahead. You're taking something out of context to prove a point to yourself, and that's where the difficulties arise.
Okay.
So I think the question is it okay to live with a wild lion in the house?
I don't like living with a wild lion.
Okay, so my answer would be move or get rid of the lion.
Right.
And again, I don't add. Yeah, I think I know where you're going. So let me, if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, please tell me. I don't mean to, and I don't mean to disrespect you. It sounds like you're trying to take something to such an extreme to say that, to contradict what's being said.
No, I'm just trying to recognize what is the wise thing to do.
Let me try and rein this in a little bit. Would you live with a wild lion?
I don't know.
Kevin, would you live with a wild lion?
No.
Why not?
Because it's dangerous.
Okay. Okay, so then I ask you, Daniel, why would you live with a wild lion?
Okay.
No, again, I'm serious. Why would you live with a wild lion? It has nothing to do with likes or dislikes. It's just sensible. You're taking the Dhamma to an extreme. You're inviting a lion into your house and then saying that foolish old teacher said that I shouldn't decide about this at all. I should lay down with this lion and hope I live through the night. Okay. Of course, I've never said anything like that. It would be foolish for anyone to live with a wild lion. And so a sensible decision framed by the Eightfold Path would be, I shouldn't let this lion move into the house. Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that the sensible answer?
Yep.
Okay, so again, I'm not trying to beat you up. What are you asking me?
What I get confused about is if I'm not supposed to have likes or dislikes, then where do I go from there? If I know that I don't like living with a wild lion, then I can choose not to live with a wild lion. But
Yep.
That's what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of things.
Well, are you saying that choosing to not live with a wild lion is somehow against the Buddha's teachings?
Because I don't like it.
It's just an extreme. You're and this relates a little bit to what was there before. You're going to an extreme view to contradict the Dhamma, and has the middle. Yes, the middle way says that it is ignorance of Four Noble Truths that leads to all manner of suffering, and it's a misunderstanding of self that leads to that. A misunderstanding of self doesn't lead us to want to live with lions or not. You're confusing the issue because you're conflating it with something that it doesn't relate to. You can't make, I can't give you a sensible answer because the scenario isn't sensible. Of course you shouldn't live with lions. But there's nothing against the Dhamma that says you should. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know where we're not connecting on this. Does anybody understand where we're getting off the rails here? Do you understand
I think
that the difference between self-identification and not living with a lion?
Okay.
It's not okay because you bring these things up, and I can't just leave them in a class open-ended because there's other people that are interested in this. It's not a matter, Diane, of not having likes and dislikes. It's about making wise choices framed by the Eightfold Path, not rooted in selfishness, not choosing things because I want them.
The other night when
Wait. We can't. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. We can't get into it. It's getting late, so we can't get into another hypothetical.
No, it was just when somebody said something about greed. I went outside and I was talking to someone. There was a time in my life when I bought 4 pairs of shoes, all different colors. That's a little greedy. I realized.
All right, but what does this have to do with the lion, Diane? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what does it have to do with?
I like shoes, and I
okay.
like what they're doing.
So this is more reasonable to make.
There's one pair of shoes would have done me just fine.
Yep.
And I didn't know that there was a thing of an excess at the time, and what it helped me to realize is that living with a lion would be excessive, and the middle way kind of thing that you're talking about is, I don't need to buy a large pizza and eat the whole thing in one go.
Okay, well, what does this have to do with likes and dislikes in the idea of the wild lion?
I just said that.
But so you understand.
It's like the middle. I'm seeing that there's a middle way that it's not. I have to like or not like or dislike something. Whatever.
You don't have to like anything, Diane. You can have a lion in your house because you like the idea of having a lion in your house, or you could choose not to. Even though all your neighbors happen to have lions living in their house, you don't want it, so you don't have to have it. And it has nothing to do with the Dhamma. It has to do with just a personal choice. Whether you personalize the choice has to do with the Dhamma. Do you see the difference?
Fine. Yes.
Okay.
Me having a lion in the house would be dangerous because it could end my life and my shooting of
Yeah, and again, we need to be careful about jumping into hypotheticals to prove something. The whole point of understanding the not self characteristic is simply to stop taking things personal. It doesn't mean that we don't enjoy our lives. It happens so often in this class that when people first start getting an understanding of the Dhamma, go to, well, it feels like annihilation and I can't live my life. I can't enjoy anything. And it's completely opposite of that. If you want to continue to live a life prone to constant stress, keep making personal decisions and keep insisting that you get everything you want and that you have to have. Because that's a life of pure misery. But if we can let go of having to need things all the time, let go of the constant I'm making, then we can live lives of lasting peace and happiness. But we have to be willing to do a few things. We have to first acknowledge that I'm ignorant of Four Noble Truths. I have to accept the fact that there's some things to learn. I have to accept the fact that I might have to change some things in my life if I'm going to live a life of lasting peace and happiness. And I have to meditate once in a while. So let's meditate before I forget completely all about it. I'm not going to get into the Loka Sutta. We just don't have time tonight. I talked about it Tuesday, and I'll probably talk about it Saturday. We're going to meditate and just finish the class. So let's go around the room right now. I want to hear what you have to say, and then we'll just end the class. Lorna, good to see you tonight.
Are we meditating?
Well, let's go around the room first, and we'll finish with meditation.
Okay. I think I'm seeing more clearly the referential point of what anatta is and how I view the world and reflect it onto anatta, which is what I think I am, which is what I'm not. And I'm seeing that more clearly in my thinking, but I think about my thinking, but not necessarily about my feelings.
Mm.
You often refer to your thinking and your feelings. As I say, I don't actually think of feelings as a conscious thinking of feelings. I kind of think about my thinking, the words that are in my head, rather than the feelings that I get from the outside world. So that's how my mind works. I don't know if that's kind of like stage one or something like that. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah, it doesn't.
Just say that that's how I think.
Yeah, usually, sometimes we can separate feelings from thoughts. Usually we got them pretty mixed up together. And it's usually feelings driving thoughts and thoughts driving feelings. And it's not all that important to distinguish the two. When it's apparent, it's apparent. When it's obvious, it's obvious. When it's not, it's not. It really doesn't matter all that much, But just to understand that there's a process. And we're feeling beings and we're thinking beings. That's the important part. And those two are enmeshed together. Yeah. They're part of anatta. Okay. Now for the big question.
No. No, this is what you said on Tuesday. I listened to it. The world is afflicted by sensory contact.
Mm-hmm. Those are the Buddha's words.
Well, yes. And I just thought that sentence was just so precise.
Mm-hmm.
That it is all about our sensory contact with phenomena that we're trying to please, which is driving us. So we're not in the driving seat of our own lives.
Yeah. That's right.
That's how I see the problem.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's living a life in a mindless way. We're just not present with what's occurring because we want it to be different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thank you.
So that was kind of that. Yeah. So thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Diane.
I'm good.
Glad you're here. Tom.
So I'm in class a little bit more, doing some more reading and meditating more regularly. When I do that, I feel more mindful, I guess, of my feelings and of different situations, how to navigate them a little bit better. I recently had one situation I had my house appraised, and it was appraised lower than I felt it should be. So there was feelings there, right? Obviously now all of a sudden that's money that I have to, come up with. It's interesting because, I noticed the feelings, I was trying to look at it. I was able to separate those feelings and step back and look at the situation, because what was happening was the feelings were starting to attach to some ignorant thoughts of why the phrase low. And so I had a couple neighbors foreclosed, and their houses were, obviously brought my house, potentially, brought my house value down. Now, I don't know exactly how the whole process works, so I think there's a little ignorance there for me to I was starting to get upset at some of these neighbors who foreclosed. And so there's like these ignorant thoughts where my feelings are trying to attach to this idea that may not even be reality. And so I'm really like trying to step back and separate that, to be able to say, okay, and maybe that's the ignorance that we're speaking of.
Yes.
The dukkha is the fact that, I'm out money now, or in theory, have less money, but in reality, just my house is whatever value it is. And I can sit there and say, well, it should be more. Well, I'm upset about the fact that life should be different than it is.
Yep.
This is how it is. It's, that's what the value of the house is. I can blame other people if I want, but that's just trying to take the feelings and attach it to something.
That right there is a strategy that you would hope to employ to continue to ignore your own ignorance. How could they foreclose on their homes? And of course, you recognize that you're ignorant of their motives,
right? And
you're creating a new motive to ignore your own upset right now at them, and that's imaginary to begin with.
Right.
It's all one big fantasy. None of it's rooted in reality, but it started from your reaction to the disappointing appraisal.
Right. And it's the ego that's trying to...
Wanting something to be different.
Wanting something to be different, and to find a place for those feelings, to say to them, they did that to me. And I feel that's where the ego is coming in.
Yeah.
When really it's just, house is what it is.
Yeah, and if all those other scenarios that you ran through in your mind are true, if you could prove, and maybe they foreclosed their homes because they wanted to get you. And if you could prove that they're all true, it still doesn't change what's occurring, does it? And your knowledge in that way doesn't help at all, does it? You're much better off accepting what's occurring and maybe get another appraiser or something else. But, but your understanding of the Dhamma is right on. That's exactly how it transpires. So, good for you. Kevin, good to see you.
I think the explanation and tonight's talk really helped me and Dependent Origination better than I have. Maybe I think it's because questions that arose and discussions that with it. I think in a goofy way, just because the order is so much different from the 5 clinging aggregates, it makes it confusing to me. What comes first, form, and then feelings and perceptions, and 5 clinging aggregates, and they're in a different order for things. But you made it make so much sense why. Better understanding of the Dhamma.
Thank you. I think you will every time through. The difficulties that we all have and everybody has with the Dhamma goes back to the Eightfold Path itself. The Eightfold Path is designed to take our thinking from confused and deluded, rooted in ignorance, and bring that same mind into a mind that is rooted in wisdom and understands Four Noble Truths. There's some difficulty involved in that change from ignorance to wisdom. There's a lot of resistance to changing our minds, to recognizing that maybe what I decided wasn't the best thing or wasn't correct. Or maybe I should change my mind just because this looks like a better way to live. Whenever we find that we're getting protective of our own views, that's when we know we're getting stuck in I-making too, when we're really trying to create contradictions where none exist and all of that. The Eightfold Path is a simple and direct path that when it's embellished, it becomes almost useless, and I would say useless. So we keep it pure, we keep well focused, we meditate properly, and we integrate the Eightfold Path, and we get to awaken. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. We need to meditate.
Can I just say that I haven't seen this before, this time around in Dependent Origination, but I can see now the reference point of anatta that creates, the dukkha, which is either resistance to a situation or wanting more of a situation. I've never thought of, if I didn't have that reference point, everything would be bland. I would have no pull or direction or resistance, or because that is what's causing it. I haven't seen that before, so I can see through. I'm beginning to see through. If I didn't have anatta, I wouldn't have desire, and I wouldn't have aversion, and I wouldn't have all those other things.
It's a misunderstanding of self that creates all those problems.
I've only just got that thinking.
Wow.
So.
There's no self, there's nothing to attach to it.
Well, in that way,
or resist, or anything, or desire.
The self is in a constant process of becoming. This self truly cannot be attached to anything except we believe that it can.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really important to bring that up. This anatta, there's all kinds of metaphors we can use. I'm going to use the one about making a game out of this. Anatta wants to make a game out of life and insists that it's a game that has to be won. And there's different ways that anatta decides that. Sometimes a not self-characteristic decides that whoever has the most money wins. Whoever has the most power wins. Who has the best friends, whoever has the best house wins. It sees it as a game. And because it sees it as a game, it's relentless. The game is its life. And it will do anything it can to protect the game, including create new rules as we go along. But that's exactly what's happened with the Dhamma. New rules have been added to the Dhamma to justify and maintain ignorance, rather than keeping it pure and develop the Dhamma the way it was intended. We want it to be something different. We want a Dhamma that allows for just maybe a little bit of eye-making. But the Buddha was consistent and relentless in that.